All right, so let's get right into it. When I say the words Cold War, what's the first thing that pops into your head?
Yep, that's what I thought. You're probably picturing spies, shadowy missile silos, the Berlin Wall, a planet basically cut in half and just waiting for the big one to drop. It's a story we all know, all about military standoffs and who could shout their ideology the loudest. But what if I told you that's only half the story? I mean, what if the real knockdown, drag-out fight wasn't about who had the most nukes, but about who had the better financial plan for the rest of the world?
And that right there is the big idea we're going to unpack. See, the usual story about the Cold War totally misses the main event, the real battlefield, the global economy. It was a quieter war for sure, but you could argue it was the one that mattered most.
One historian put it just perfectly. They said the Cold War wasn't just about military muscle or whose philosophy was better. No, it was a rivalry between two completely different blueprints, really, for how to organize the world's money.
So to really get this, we need to talk about a concept called structural power. Now think of it this way. It's not about being the strongest piece on the chessboard. It's about getting to design the board itself and write the rules before anyone even makes a move. It's the power to shape how money flows around the globe, getting other countries to play your game without ever firing a single bullet.
So who were the big players in this massive economic showdown? Let's take a look at the two contenders, each holding a totally different vision for how the world should work. So in this corner, you've got the USA in the West. Their game plan? Liberal capitalism. They wanted a world with open markets, everybody trading with everybody, all run through a set of institutions they just created. And in the other corner, you have the USSR and the East. They offered something completely different, socialism. Their club was called COMECON, and it was all about top-down central planning and total state control. I mean, these weren't just policy disagreements. These were two opposing visions for the entire future of humanity.
Now, the West got its economic weapons ready first. Back in 1944, they set up what's known as the Bretton Woods system. This is where giants like the IMF and the World Bank were born. Officially, the goal was really noble. Make sure another Great Depression never happens by creating a stable world economy. But strategically, the real goal was to write the rules of the game for everybody else. The Soviet Union looked at all this and basically said, no thanks. They completely rejected Bretton Woods and decided to build their own playground. They called it the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance, or COMECON. You can think of it as a parallel economic universe designed to wire all the socialist countries together through government planning, totally walled off from the West's system.
Okay, so the lines are drawn. You have these two massive economic blocks basically staring each other down. But the real action, the main event, wasn't going to be in Europe or North America. No, the real prize was the hearts, minds, and especially the economies of all these brand new nations popping up all over the world.
This is exactly where the game was played. All these countries across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, fresh out of colonial rule, what we often call the Global South, they became the absolute center of the rivalry. Both the US and the USSR knew that whichever side could pull these nations into its orbit would win the whole thing in the long run. So how'd they do it? Well, they didn't send in the tanks. They waged war with their checkbooks. Each side started wooing these new countries with huge financial aid packages, funding massive projects, think giant dams, new factories, and dangling these super attractive trade deals that were all designed to pull them deeper and deeper into their economic team.
And let's be totally honest here. This was never about charity. The objective was crystal clear. Use money to buy friends and create allies. It was like a giant puppeteer's game. Whether a country took a loan from the World Bank or signed a deal with COMECON, they weren't just picking a business partner. They were picking a side in the Cold War, and that choice often locked them into a cycle of dependency for decades to come.
So, for decades, these two systems battled it out. But in the end, one of them just collapsed, while the other went on to dominate the entire planet. The big question is why?
Well, the central idea in the source material we're looking at is that this wasn't an accident. It wasn't just bad luck or a couple of dumb mistakes. The final outcome was actually baked into the very design of each system from the very beginning. It was structural.
So let's do a little tale of the tape here. First up, adaptability. The Western system, because it was based on markets, it could bend, it could respond to a crisis. The socialist system, on the other hand, was super rigid, planned from the top down. That meant when it got hit with something unexpected, it didn't bend, it shattered. Next, global reach. The West system was designed to pull literally everyone in. COMECON was more like an exclusive, isolated club. And finally, authority. The power of the IMF and World Bank was built into the institutions themselves, based on rules and money. COMECON's power, it was all political.
And it could change overnight based on whoever was in charge in Moscow. And that difference, well, that turned out to be fatal. And all of those structural flaws, they all lead to this one single year, 1991, the year the Soviet Union officially dissolved. It was the final nail in the coffin for the socialist economic experiment and a decisive knockout victory for its rival.
So the fight was over, a winner was declared. But the ripples from that victory, the legacy of it, are what have fundamentally shaped the world every single one of us lives in today.
And this is the part you really got to get. This globalized world we're in, this whole web of trade and finance that connects all of us, it didn't just happen. It was built. It is the direct inheritance, the leftover operating system from the Western model that won this economic Cold War.
Think about it. The world after 1991 was built entirely on the winner's blueprint. It's a world where liberal economics became the default setting, with American economic leadership at the helm. A world where institutions like the IMF and World Bank were suddenly the only game in town. And this has created these long-lasting patterns of development and, yeah, for a lot of countries, dependency that are still very much with us today.
For a while there, that victory looked permanent, absolute. But, history has a funny way of never quite being over. Is this world, the one born from the Cold War's end, really the final chapter?
And that brings us right up to this very moment. Because now we're seeing these new powerful institutions rise up, like the China-led Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which are starting to offer an alternative. They're challenging that post-1991 setup. And it leaves us with a huge question. Are we watching the rules of the game get rewritten all over again? Could we, right now, be living through the opening moves of a brand new economic Cold War? Something to think about.